So before we get started building our application, let's first look at what we're going to build. So we're going to be making a clone of the YouTube app, the web application. And just in case you haven't used it before, which is very unlikely, but let's go through it. So as you can see, we have functionalities that's like making the menu smaller and bigger. We have the search functionality. We have the search by voice. We have the ability to change the theme and change the language. And when you hover over a video, you see that you get like a mini player of the video. We can also change to different, I will call it like different categories. Okay, so this is the main YouTube app. Let's go to the application we're going to build, which is going to be a clone of it. So as you can see in our application, we can also make the menu big and smaller. We can search, let's say we search for Christmas. Nice. We can do a voice search. Click on search with your voice. We say allow this time. And let's say love. As you can see, it's searched. Let's go to settings. We say we can change languages. So French. We can go back to English. We can also change the theme. It's light theme. Go back to dark theme. We can change categories from here. And whenever we hover over the videos, we see we get the mini player. We can go to the short section, click on show more, get a show more, show less, and we can click on a video to watch the full video. You can also change categories here, watch a new video. Yeah, so this is what we're going to be building. Let's get right into it. So let us create our React Typescript project. So to do this, I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to create a new folder. You can do this wherever you want. I'm going to call it YouTube. I'm going to open a terminal and I'm going to change directory and I'm just going to drag it in here. So now that's going to change the directory to the YouTube folder. Now inside that directory, I'm going to run the command npx create react app. I'm just going to add at latest to make sure it's using the latest. And since I'm already in the folder, I just put a full stop and then I'll add the template. So in this case, the template will be TypeScript. Click on enter. So while it's creating the React application, I can drag the folder in to my VS Code. So I'm just going to drag this on top of VS Code, and this is going to open the folder. Can delete the updates. So as you can see, the files and directories are still loading. Let's see if it's done. It's not done yet. Okay. Okay, good. Now the application is done. To start the application up, I'm going to open the VS Code terminal by holding Ctrl-tilde. You can also do this by that. So if we go to view and we click on terminal, we can open our terminal that way too. So in here, I'm going to run npm stats. Okay. Now let me open. It's open a new file. Okay. So this is what we have. Now in the next video, we're going to do some cleanup. So if you got this warning after creating your application, here's how we're going to fix it. First, let's split our terminal. And in the new terminal, we're going to run npm I, which is short for install. I'm going to say --save -dev. And we're just going to copy this plugin, paste it, and we're going to run it. Good. So now that's fixed, and we have our application. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some cleanup. So we're going to start from the app.tsx, and the first thing you're going to notice is it's no longer .jsx or .js. Our files now are going to be .tsx, which is TypeScript with JSX, or we're going to have files ending with .ts, just like this one. So the first things first is let's go ahead and delete this app.test.tsx. Let's also go ahead and delete the logo.svg. Then in our app.tsx, let's remove this class name app, and let's just return a text that says hello React with TypeScript. Remove the logo, remove the app.css, and let's go to the app.css file and let's delete everything in it. Okay, let's go back to application. Nice. Okay, so in the next video, we're actually going to start working on the home page using styled components. In this, so we're going to be using styled components to build our React components. So this is a CSS and JS library that lets us really build reusable components in React. So this is the npm page, and to install it, we just copy the install command, which is npm I styled components. We can go ahead and paste it. I've installed it already, but we can just go ahead and do it again. So npm I styled components. Good, we have that installed. So if you're interested in learning more about styled components, I would really encourage you to go and take my course, which is React and Styled Components. And in this course, we actually learn a lot about styled components, and we use it to create a Pinterest clone application. This is another really good application that would really help your resume, your portfolio stand out, and really help you learn about React and styled components if you're interested. So check it out if you're interested, but in this course, we're going to be using styled components. Okay, so first things first, we have to create kind of an app container, which is going to contain the application. So let's go into our app.tsx. It's kind of a tongue twister. And let's change our app.css to, I'm going to click on rename, to app.styles.tsx. Okay. So in here, we're going to use our first styled component. So to do that, we're going to say export const, let's call it app container. It's going to be equals to styled, which is going to come from our styled components. So I have a plugin called auto import. And this plugin actually helps me auto import modules. So for example, after typing in styled, I get the option to click on tab, which will then auto import my styled from styled components. So let's do that again. If I click on tab, I get auto import. So you can go ahead and use the plugin if you like. I digressed. So let's continue. So style.div, because it's going to be a div, and then we have the double tilde or the string literal template. Let's open it, and in between that, we're going to say width will be 100 view width. Let's say height will be 100 view height. Let's give it an overflow here. We don't want anything overflowing. And just to make sure we see it, let's give it a background color of red. Since we exported this, we can go ahead in the app.tsx file and we can use it. So again, pressing tab, I can auto import that from app.styles. Nice. Okay, let's go to our application, refresh. Nice. So in the next video, let's go ahead and set up things like global styles and start adding themes to our application. The reason is we're going to be able to support light and dark themes. So we want our background color to come from our themes. So if it's a black theme, we want the dark background. And if it's a light theme, we want the lighter background. So before we continue, let's go ahead and add fonts to our application. If you notice, there are two fonts on this page. So there's this font used to write the YouTube, and then there's the normal font. So let's go ahead and add that. We're going to be using Google Fonts. So just open Google, type in Google Fonts, and just click on the first link. It should take you to this page or a page that looks similar depending on when you're watching this video. The first font we want is called Oswald. You're going to click on it. And for this font, we want the medium 500. So that's going to be this font over here. The next font is going to be Roboto. And for this one, we're just going to get the... Okay, we have to first select Roboto, the name. And then we're going to select the regular one. So regular 400. Good. Now on the right, we're going to have this link. So we can just click on this copy icon to copy it, or you can copy it manually. We're going to go to our application. We're going to go to the public directory. We're going to open our index.html. And just under, maybe right on top the title tag, we're going to just put the comment. So for comments, just hold command and put /. We're going to say Google Fonts. And under the comments, we're going to paste what we copied. By holding Command S or Control S, I'll auto save it. And now we have those two fonts. Okay, so in the next part of our, in the next video, we're going to work on adding global styles to the application. So to continue, let's go ahead and add global styles to our application. So we're going to go to app.styles.tsx and we're going to create a global style. So to do this, let's say export const, let's call it global style. This could be any name you choose, but for this instance, we're going to call it global style. We're going to use a function that comes from style component called create global style. Open the string literal, and in here we're going to add our styles. So we're going to select everything. We're going to select everything before, and we're going to select everything after. Open our braces. So in here we're going to say margin should be equals to 0. We're going to say padding equals to 0. Let's give tint a border of none. We're also going to set the font family. If you remember, we put the font family for Roboto, and we have the font families for Roboto and Oswald. So in this case, we're going to use Roboto, and fallback font family will be sans serif. So for box sizing, we can go ahead and put border box. We're going to make this important just to make sure you're really using it. So let's put some WebKit. So let's say the WebKit box sizing will be the same. So we're just going to copy border box. We're going to do the same. Let's duplicate this 2 more times. So this will be for Mozilla, and we're going to put for MS Microsoft. Okay. So let's add more global styles for the scroll bars. So we're going to set the WebKit scroll bar. We're going to set the width to 0. We're going to set the background to transparent. Then we can set the Microsoft. Let's set the overflow style to none. We really don't want any overflows. And we'll just set the scroll bar width to none. We can also set the WebKit. And in case you're wondering, these are things you just kind of pick up over time, or you can just copy from the internet. So display here will be none. So this is just ways I want to get rid of the scroll bars. Okay, so since we've exported the global style, let's go to our app.tsx and let's put it on the same place, the same level as the root component. So right now the main component is app container. So to put it on the same level, we're going to import it, paste it, and import global style. Now in React, we can only export one child component, so we can wrap this in a fragment. Okay, everything still looks good. Let's see if it's working. Let's copy this background color red. It's gone. Let's put it in the global style and see if it makes a difference. Nice. So we know our global style is indeed working. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to start working on theming our application. So let's go ahead and discuss themes. To add theme to our applications, let's go to the source directory. And in there, let's create a new folder called utils. Inside this utils folder, let's create a new file. And we do this by double tapping on utils, tapping on new file. And let's call it theme.ts. Since there's no component in this file, it's going to be .ts. But in other files that has components using JSX, we call it .csx. But they still use TypeScript. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in our themes. In case you wondered how I got them, I just went to the page using a color picker. This is a plugin you can add to your web application or to your website or to your web browser, and it helps you pick colors on the page. So we have background color, text color, and we have different colors for both the dark theme and the light theme. Now, before we move forward and start adding TypeScript to this, let's go ahead and discuss something first. You see, there's a difference between JavaScript with React and TypeScript with React. With JavaScript, which is the one on the left, we kind of get to do whatever we want, in the case that we get to write our code without any kind of review, if you understand what I mean. This means like in JavaScript, you can do things like trying to access properties on an object that might not exist, or trying to add a string with a number, things like that. While on the other hand, which is the right hand side, TypeScript, imagine TypeScript like a code reviewer that kind of reviews your code as you type it, and it tells you whenever there's an error in the code. So we kind of have someone always watching our code and reviewing it and pointing out any errors that might happen. For example, if we try to access a property on an object that don't exist. So in TypeScript, there's something called type annotations. And this is like we add extra documentation to our code to kind of tell the compiler what's going on in our code. We're going to see more of this throughout this application. And then there's another thing called type inference. So this is when TypeScript compiler, which is very smart by the way, kind of looks at our code and has an idea of what's going on. So we don't really have to tell it what's going on. It just kind of figures it out by itself. And we've discussed the files. So TypeScript will be files ending in TSX, TS, etc. Okay, now we know what type annotations and type inference is. Let's go ahead to the application. So if I hover over the DAG theme, you're going to see this. And this is TypeScript type inference in action. So TypeScript already knows that our variable DAG theme contains background, text, and all this stuff, and it knows the types. So it knows background is a string, text is a string, and etc. For example, if I should change this to a number, 56, and I hover over DAG theme, it's going to know that that is a number, backdrop is a number. So this is what is called type inference. Although TypeScript can infer most of our code, sometimes it's good habit to add annotations to our code. So to add annotations to a variable, we're going to put the semicolon after that, and then we can copy. So we can put the annotations here. So since this is an object, we're going to put the object braces, and let's open it. So we can say background is a string, like we've already seen. Go to the next one, text is a string, etc, etc. We'll have to do all of them. But if you already noticed, this is kind of a waste of time. One, because TypeScript has already inferred it, and two, we already kind of have it here. So if we just copy what TypeScript have already shown us, so we can just copy it from here, if your IDE allows you to do that, and we can just paste it. So it's a bit of a, let's see what's this. So okay, close this. Nice. Okay. So as you can see, now it allows it because this is a proper annotation. So it knows that DAG theme is going to hold all these property values and with the right type. So if we come here and change this to a number, TypeScript is going to complain. It's going to tell us that number is not assignable to string. And this is because we've told TypeScript that backdrop is going to be a string. And right here, we're putting it as a number. So TypeScript is complaining and telling us something is going on there. So we're going to put it back to a string. So as you can see, this is already very, it's hard to read. So in the next video, we're going to be talking about types and interfaces. And this is ways that we can extract our types as variables and reuse them in our application. So before we continue, let's discuss types. We're going to start with talking about the any type, type inference, and type annotations. Let's assume we wanted to create a variable called count. So we can say let count, which will create the variable count. If we hover over count, we can see the count is annotated by TypeScript as any. Now, this is our first type. We get the any type anytime TypeScript cannot infer what that type would be. That's because we haven't told TypeScript what it's going to be by assigning this variable a value, or we don't tell TypeScript what the type of that variable would be. So in this case, we didn't add any annotations to it. So type inference. Let's say we assign this count 100. Now we can see, even without annotation, TypeScript can tell that this count is a number. So if you hover over count, you're going to see it's going to say number. The same thing with if we should have assigned a string counter, and we hover over count, we see TypeScript is smart enough to infer that this count is a string. Now let's assume we don't add any value to it. Of course, it goes back to the any type. And later on in the future, we can then say count is equals to 100. Now, TypeScript still says this count is any, even though we've assigned a value to it. This is why we should try as much as possible to annotate our code. So anytime we don't assign a value to our variable right away, we have to annotate it. So here we have to say count is going to be a number. This then tells TypeScript that in the future, we should only be allowed to assign numbers to count. So if we hover over count now, we can see count is a number. And if by mistake, we assign a string to count, we can see TypeScript complaining already, saying string is not assignable to type number. So this is the use of TypeScript, the ability to let the compiler check our code and tell us if there's any errors. This is why we should try to avoid any types as much as possible, because at that point, it just means anything goes. Okay, so let us practice our type annotations. Without hovering over the variable names and cheating, let's go ahead and annotate them ourselves. So the first one, count, is a number. So to annotate it, we add a semicolon and we add our number. It's good. The second one is a boolean. The third one, obviously, is a string. And if you notice, these are not capital letters, these are small letters. So it is not capital letter string, it is a small letter string. Good. Now, arrays. So if you see, this is an array of 2 strings. So how we do this in TypeScript is first saying the type that it contains, and then we put the square brackets, which is for the array, and then array of strings. So you notice how it's not plural strings, it's just string. So it's saying this is an array that contains string. Okay, moving on. So the next one is an object. To annotate an object, we put a semicolon and we open the object curly braces. Now we see the object has a name, that is a string. It has an age, that is a string. Actually, looking back, it should be a number. Just gonna correct this. Now it has a smart, which is a boolean. And we have cusses, which is just like above, is an array of string. So the same thing with user C. So we can just copy from user B and we can paste it. Now, user list. User list is going to be an array of objects, just like user B and user C. So we can also say, we can also just paste the type from above. Let's see what the error is. Okay, so we have to remove this semicolon. Nice. And we have to correct this to a number. Okay. The first thing we notice is these are a bit too long. So we're kind of duplicating this annotation 3 times. So we have it here, we have it here, and we have it here. So let's talk about type, and let's talk about, what's the name of the other one? Type and interfaces. Yeah, so in the next video, we'll talk about types and interfaces. So in TypeScript, we can actually create our type. And this would help things like reusability across our code. To do that, let's use the keyword type. We're going to name our type user type. It can be anything, but since we want a type to represent our user, we're going to call it user type. We're going to add an equals and just copy the type since we already have it and just paste it. So now we have a type of user type. So anywhere we've used this type, we can just replace it with user type. I did that shortcut by copying it, holding Command D to copy the next lines where it's present, and then you can just replace it all at once. So as you can see, TypeScript is not complaining. So the types can be used to store any type. For example, we could also create another type called, let's say, string array. So let's create a type called string array. Type string array. Again, this could be anything, and it's just an array that holds strings. So now anywhere we've had string array, like here, we can just replace it with that type. And we can come here and replace it with this type. So you can create type of anything to store any kind of type you want. Okay, next, let's talk about interfaces. You see, interfaces, unlike types, is used mainly to store objects. For example, since this is an object, we can copy this and say interface, let's call it, it usually starts with I. So we're going to say I, then user type. There's no equals to, so we can just put the object like that. Interface, user type, and this is the object. Unknown keyword or identifier. Did you mean interface? Oh, sorry. Okay, I spelled that wrong. So interface. Nice. Okay. So now we've created an interface called iUserType. So we can go and replace anywhere we have user type. So in these three places, we can replace it with our interface iUserType. And now we don't need this anymore. So just to kind of go back on what we said, interfaces are used for objects, while types are used for any type we want. It's good practice to use interface for objects just because this is what other programmers are expecting to. But you can also store your object types in the type variable. So now we've practiced our type annotations and type inference. Let's go back to our application. Okay, so now we've understood a bit about type annotations and type inference along with interfaces. Let's go ahead and extract this into an interface. So right at the top, we're going to say interface, and we're going to call this interface item. Again, this could be any name you come up with. We're going to copy this object. We're going to remove it, and we're going to just put this back to how it was. So it's going to be export const stack team. Okay, good. And we're just going to paste it here. So now we have an interface item that we can then use here. So we can now annotate this with item. Same with the light team, because they both have the same properties. So if we should, for example, get rid of this, we're going to say it's going to tell us this object literal only specify backdrop. So we're going to say it's not assignable to type item. So it's going to say this, what we have here is not meeting the criteria of item. So this item interface kind of holds us accountable in some sense. Good. So now we have our light team and dark team. We can create an object from this. Let's say export const teams. And this is in case we have multiple teams. So we're going to say dark team is going to be equals to dark team, which is right here. And then we're going to say light is going to be equals to light team, which is right here. Nice. So now we have our teams. Okay. So when you're using styled components, it's in the documentation. You just have to add this code. And this is because we want everywhere. We want the annotations to be available everywhere in our code. This is something you can go on the website and read more about. But for now, let's just put it in. Components, styled components. Open our object, and we can say export interface default team extends item. Again, this is something we just kind of have to add, and we're going to open the brackets here. Okay, so now everywhere in our application, we can import these themes, and by passing whether we want the dark or the light theme, we can get all the themes. Okay, so now we've set up our theme, it's time to use it and make it available to our application. To do that, Start components actually give us something called theme provider. So we can hit tab to import it. And theme provider, it takes a prop called theme. Of course, this is going to be an object which would have all our which would have the theme colors. Okay, so up here we're going to have a variable which would hold our theme. We can say const. We can call it current theme. And let's start with dark. Okay, so to get to the theme, we're going to import our themes, which is from here. So we're going to get these themes, and we're going to have to pass a key, which will be dark or light. So if we pass dark, we're going to get the dark theme, and if we pass light, we're going to get the light theme. So we're going to say themes bracket current theme. Nice. So by doing this, we now have this dark theme available in every component that is wrapped in the theme provider. So it kind of works with the use context philosophy. And we're also going to move these variables to a use context hook later in the video. But for now, we can just store our theme in a variable like this. So let's go ahead and use it. So in our global style, which is in our app.styles.tsx, we can go to our app container and say background colon. It's going to be equals to, again, if you want to learn more about style components, you should take my style component course. But this is how we access variables or props in style components. So we're going to say props dot theme, and because we've annotated it, we get a good what was it called again? Autocomplete. Yeah, so we get theme, and then if I put a dot, we can get whatever we want. So in this sense, we want the background. Nice. So if we go, we can see we have the dark background. If we go back to our app.tsx and change this to light, and we go back, we can see we have the light theme. So now our theming is working. In the next video, we're going to work on moving this to a use context hook. Before we continue, let's talk about the union type. You see, the union type is used to assign multiple types to a variable. For example, let's say we have a variable called isPresent equals to, let's say, true. So we want isPresent to be true, which is of type Boolean. But what if isPresent later on could also be, let's say, the string yes. As you can see, Typescript doesn't let us do this. It complains that type string is not assignable to type Boolean. So we can fix this by using the union type and adding a type annotation that says isPresent can be of Boolean, or it can be of type string. And now Typescript doesn't complain anymore. What we can't do, however, is now change this to a number. Typescript complains. It says type 100 is not assignable to type string or Boolean. So this is the union type. It's used to add multiple types. We can also say add another type number. And now the issue is gone. Let us discuss function types. Let's write a function that takes two values and adds them together and returns the result. So there are multiple ways you can create functions in JavaScript. We can start with an arrow function. We can say let's add equals to an arrow function. We can say we're going to take value 1 and value 2. As you can see, TypeScript already complains. It says 1, it's declared but not used, but it also says it has an any type. And as we remember, we want to try our best to avoid any types. So let's annotate this function. We start by annotating the inputs by just beside the variable names. We can say value 1 is a number, and then annotate value 2, number. Okay, what about the return? We return value 1 plus val 2. As you can see, if I over add, you can see TypeScript is smart enough to infer that we return a number. If I should add a string, as you know, adding a string to anything will make it a string. It will also infer that it returns a string. So TypeScript is smart enough in that way. However, it's good practice to add annotations to our return type. In this case, it's going to be after the curly brackets. So right here, we're going to add this and say it's going to return a number. So later on, if we come and return a string, TypeScript is going to complain. It's going to say type string is not assignable to type number. Okay, so this is one way of annotating the arrow function. Let's go ahead and annotate, put this back to string. Let's go ahead and make this a name function. So we can say function add2 should be a name function. And we're also going to take val1 and val2. Then we're going to return val1 plus val2. As you can see, TypeScript return. TypeScript complains about the annotations. So, like before, we can simply annotate this to number and number. Good. And we can add our return type right here, which would be number. Good. So this is how you annotate function, name function. You can also annotate anonymous function. For example, let's say we had an array, let's say an array of strings. So let's just say let's cos. Actually, we already have an array of string here, so cusses. Let's use cusses. So let's say we wanted to map through cusses. So cusses.map, and in here we write an anonymous function, just the arrow function. So each of them is going to be a cos. So let's say the cos would be cos. We can just call it cos. And then the return type will be, let's say we want to return cos plus, for some reason, 1. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, if we wanted to annotate this, TypeScript is smart enough to know that since cosses is an array of strings, each cos is going to be a string. However, we can also add annotation here if we needed to. In this case, it's useless, it's not needed, but this is how we'll go ahead and annotating anonymous functions if need be. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, so let's continue with our application. And this is adding our theme in the context. That way to make it available to the whole application using the use context hook. So to continue, in the source directory, let's make a new folder called context. And inside this folder, let's make a file called app.context. This could be called anything, but in this case, I'm just going to call it app.context.csx. Good. Okay. So I'm guessing you're familiar with the use context hook. To start, we're going to create our context. So we're going to say const app context. Again, you can call this anything, but I'm just going to call it app context equals to create context which comes from React. You can see. Then we have a generic here, and it takes no. And then you can set this to no. This is usually the initial starting point of create context. But we're also going to be able to store a value in this context. So let us annotate what that value would look like using an interface. So I'm going to say interface. Let's call it I app context value. And to start, I'm just going to assign the theme because this is what we know so far. We know that the theme is either going to be light or the union dark. Let's go ahead and use this interface. Okay, so all this means is at the start, our context is going to be null. And then later on, we're going to add values to it, which would match this interface. So one of those values is going to be our theme. So that is why here, we're putting it in the generic type, which we're going to discuss more about later. And we're going to say it's either no or we have our values. So now we have our context. Let's go ahead and create our provider. So to do that, we're going to have to create const. I'm going to call it app context provider. Again, this is a name you can choose on your own. And we're going to create an arrow function. That's good. Inside our arrow function, we're going to return, because this will be the wrapper of all our application. So we're going to take children. This is because we're going to put everything inside this app context provider. So it's going to take children. Sorry, this should be curly braces. Children. And let's go ahead and annotate our children. We can annotate it inline by just saying, by opening curly braces and saying children would have a type of React node. Okay, but it's always a good practice to assign the interface to our props. So we can say and we're going to call it app context provider props. So it's usually this, the name of the component, and we just add props. And then we can copy this and paste it here. Then rather than writing this online, we can just use our interface here. Okay, so now let's return, which will be everything, the children wrapped into our provider. So let's say return app context dot provider, and we're going to return children. But if you see, we have a complaint. We say the provider is missing a value property. Let's go ahead and provide that. So value is equals to an object, and let's create the object value, which we don't have yet. So let's create it right now. So let's say value is going to be of course it's going to be an object. So we can say const value, which will be an object, and this object is going to have properties which is going to match this interface. So to start, it's going to have theme, which we're going to store in our state over here. So we can say const theme, which would have a function. So this is just creating a state. So the function will be called setTheme, and it's going to be equals to useState, which again uses a generic function, a generic type, and it's going to be of type either light or dark. So it's going to be of this type too. So we can just copy this and paste it here. Then to start, we can start with, why not, a dark theme, right? So usually this would be theme, but the shorthand, since they are both the same, the key is the same as the value, we can just say theme. So we're passing this theme in our value, and now the value is passed to the app context.provider. Okay, let me just go over this again. So in our app context provider, we're storing this state, which is a generic that has the types of light or dark, right? So at initialization, the theme is a dark theme. And now we're going to store this in our value object and pass this object in our app context provider. So any component that is wrapped with this app context provider would have access to all these values. Okay, so let's go ahead and add one more thing. App context provider, we'll need to export this because we're going to use it later on in our components. But let's go ahead and add something else. As you can notice here, the app context could be null and it could also have this value. So when accessing the context in the future, we only want to access it when it has the value. So we need to create a custom hook. So let's say export use app context, which is going to be a function. We're going to create our variable app context, and let's say it's equals to use context, which is how we would have normally accessed our app context. So we would have say use context app context, which is this app context here. Add a const. Good. Okay. So we want to add this check, which is called type narrowing. So if we do not have an app context, in the case if it's no, we want to let's throw an error. So throw new error. Sorry, it's capital letter. And we're just going to say there is no context. However, if we do have a context, we're going to return app context. So anytime we want to access the values, we're going to use app context. Nice. Okay, let's go in our app.csx and use this. So rather than having the current theme at types like this, we can say const theme equals to use app context. And now we're going to pass the current theme as theme. Go back to application, says there is no context, refresh, we get there is no context at use app context. Let's go and see what the issue is. Use app context. So the reason we got that error is because we haven't wrapped our components in our app context provider. So let's go and do that in our index.csx. So we're going to import our app context provider, and then we can go ahead and move the app into it. There's a shorthand for this by just holding the option key and clicking up. So as you can see, we now have the dark theme, and if we should go to our context and change our theme to light, we get a light theme. So this is working, and this is very good. Okay, so let's start working on the header container. If we look closely, you can see that the header container is split into three. We have the left, which we're going to call the left section. We have kind of the set section, which is in the center, and these two make up the right section. Okay, so let's go ahead and start on that. So in our source folder, we can create a new folder called components. Inside the components folder, we're going to create a new folder called header. Now inside this header folder, we're going to create a new file called header.tsx. We're going to also create the style sheet, which is going to be header.styles.ts. Good. So let's open the header.tsx file. In this file, we're going to create our components using the short form. I use the AFCE, and this is from the ES7 plus React, Redux, React Native Snippets. It's called plugin. Yeah. So if I type this shorthand and I press tab, it creates the component for me. Okay, good. So let us create our header container and let's call it styled header. It doesn't exist yet, so we're going to have to go into our styled file. We're going to say export const. We're going to paste the name styled header. It's going to be equals to styled, which is going to come from styled components .div, and we're going to open our string literal. Make sure to import styled from styled components. Okay, so the styled header is going to have a width of 100%. It's going to have a height of 5.8 view h. We're going to give it a display of flex. We're going to give it a justify content of space between. We're going to say align items is going to be center. And we're going to say padding is going to be 0 for the top and bottom and 1 rem for the left and right. So, okay, this looks good. So space between kind of takes all the section and kind of puts spaces in between, just like this. And then we have the patterns. Okay, so now we have the styled header. Let's go into our header.tsx and let's import it. So if I remove the last character and type it back, I'm going to have the option to autocomplete and auto import. So by clicking tab, it auto imports it for me. If we go to the style sheet, header.style.ts, let's give it a background color of, let's say red. And now we have the header. Let's go to our app.tsx and let's put the header inside the app container. Good. So if we go to our React app, we see the header here. This is looking good. So let's create the 3 different sections. So in this header component, we can create 3 sections. Let's call the first one the left section. And here we're just going to type left section. It doesn't exist yet, so we're going to have to create it in our style sheet later on. And we can just duplicate this 3 times. The other one is going to be called the head. We're going to call it the search section. So we have the left section, we have the search section. So make sure that it auto completes the closing tag too. And then we also have the header more section. So we're going to call the last part header more section. And that's because it has this drop down, which we're going to make later on. Okay, so now we've created these 3 styled components. Well, not yet. We have to go create them in this styled file. So we're going to say export const. We're going to paste left section. It's going to be equals to styled.div and the template literal. So the left section is going to have a display of flex, right? So we want it to be side by side. So by default it's side by side. We want to align items to center. So align items center. And then we want to add a gap because there's a gap in between this and the more menu. So we're going to say the gap is going to be 1 rem. Good. Let's go ahead and import the left section. Nice. Okay, so now the search section. The search section is going to be pretty much the same thing. We want it side by side. We want it to align on the center, and we want the gap in between. So we can just duplicate the left section code and paste search section. So we replace the name with search section. Good. So let's go here and import search section. Looks good. So the last part, the header more section. Let's do the same thing. Let's duplicate the search section and replace it with header more section. But there's a difference. The header more section, we want the gap to be 0.85. Because if you notice, it's a bit smaller. So we're going to give it a gap of 0.85. And then we're going to give it a position of relative. You're going to see why in the future, but that's because we want to later align this drop-down menu relative to this drop-down icon. Okay, so let's go back to our header.csx and let's just import the header more section. Let's go to our code. Look at it. Nice. So we have the left section. I should probably change the name. This is just search. We can just say this is the more section. Okay, good. So in the next video, we're going to start working on the different sections. Okay, so let's start working on the left section. As you can see, it's made up of a button, so the more menu button, and it has this logo section, which has the icon for the YouTube, and then the YouTube text. So let's go to the code. In the header section, in the header.csx file, we go to the left section. Let's remove the text left section. And let's start by making the logo section. As usual, this section did not exist yet, so we're going to have to go into the header.styles.cs file to make it. So we're going to say export const. We're going to paste the name logo section. It's going to be styled. And this time around, we're going to have to use a link because if you click on this, it's going to refresh the page. This is kind of a home button, like a home link. So we're going to be using React Router DOM to do this. We can install it by copying the install command, which is npm-i React Router DOM, and we're going to paste it in our IDE terminal. So we click run. Nice. So that's done. So we're going to say styled, and we're going to open our curve braces, and in here we're going to pass link, which is coming from React Router DOM. We're going to put in our string literal, and let's apply our styles. So our styles is going to be display flex. It's going to be align items, center. It's going to have a gap of 0.2 rem, and because usually links have this default underline, we're going to remove it by saying the text decoration should be none. We don't want any styles to it. Good. So let's go back to our header.tsx and let us import our logo section. Nice. Okay. So we're having this error because it's expecting, let us see, it 2 attributes. So since this is a link, right, this is a styled link, as you can see, it expects an attribute 2, which tells the component where to route to. In this case, we just want to go home. So slash is the home, because when we click on this, it's just going to take us, it's kind of going to refresh and just take us back to the home page. So now we've added the two attributes, we're good. So in here, inside the logo section, let's start by adding our YouTube icon. So this YouTube icon. And for that, we're going to be using React icons. So let us install React icons by just copying the install command. So we'll copy that, we're going to go to our terminal, paste it, and run it. Nice. Now it's done. You can search for icons by just typing out the name. So in this case, you can just type on YouTube, and you can see the different icons from different icon libraries. So there's Ant Design, Bootstrap, Box, etc. So in this case, I've already selected the icon I'll use. So the icon name is going to be, we're going to open braces, we're going to say FA YouTube. And it's going to come from, just make sure of that. So FA YouTube is going to, we're going to import it from, we're going to say import. We're going to open curve braces. So import FA YouTube from, I'm going to say React icons / FA. And that's because the name starts with FA. Usually, React icons tells you the import. So if I say FA YouTube, which is this one, it tells you where to import it from. So you can just copy this. But since I've already done this before, I already know where it comes from. Good. Okay, so now we have our icon. We're gonna want to give the icon a size. So we'll give it a size of 30, and we'll give it a color of, in this case it's going to be FF0000. Okay, so let's just talk about a bit of TypeScript here. How did I know that FA YouTube takes an attribute color and size as props? So usually when you're using a component, you can hold Command key and click on it. So it's going to take us to this index.de.ts, which is kind of a type definition file for TypeScript. So you can see all the icon names, and you can see they all are annotated with this type icon type. So if I hold Command and click on icon type, it takes me here. So this is the type, icon type, and this is the props it takes, and it returns a JSX element, which is the icon. So if I hold Command again and click on the icon based props, it's going to take us up here, and we can see the props it takes. So in this case, color, size, title, and children. And this question mark beside it tells us that these props are optional. So if we do not pass it, it doesn't complain. But if we do pass it, it takes it into consideration. Okay, so now let's work on the text. The text, if you notice, we're going to have different sizes of text. So in this case, this text is bigger than this text. So we're going to have a default text component. So to do that, let's go into utils and let's create a new file called text.tsx. Actually, it's going to be text.styles.ts. Good. So in here, we're going to create kind of our text component, our custom text component using styled components. So it's going to be export const text equals to styled dot p, and we're using p because it's a text. So that's the paragraph tag. So it's going to take we're going to use the prop. So for the color, we're going to use the color prop. So we're going to use the color from the theme. So in this case, it's going to be, we're going to open the curve braces and we're going to return theme.text. It's going to be theme. Remember, every styled component have access to this theme attribute. And inside this theme, if we go back to our theme, we see that we have a text, a color called text. So in the light theme, our text is going to be dark, and in the dark theme, our text is going to be light. So that is why we can come here and do theme.text. So it's complaining because it doesn't know what theme is. So usually it's going to be props here, and we can then say props.theme.text. But we can also destructure here, just say destructure theme, and we can remove the props dots. Good. So that is the color. So for font size, we're going to have a default font size of 14 pixel. Nice. So we have our text component. So let's use it here. The text component, we're going to import it from this one, utils text.styles. Click on tab. So now we have that. We're going to open it and we're just going to type in the text YouTube. Let's go and see what we have so far. We have it complaining. Let's refresh. So it's complaining cannot destructure base name as it is no. I do not see any errors. Where's this coming from? So the reason we're having this issue is because we haven't wrapped our app in a browser router. So we can do this inside the index.tsx. So if we go to the index.tsx, just below the strict mode, we can wrap everything in here. So we can copy it. We can put in the browser router, which comes from React Router DOM. And we can paste everything inside. Let's go back and we can see the issue is gone. Let's go ahead and remove this red background. So we can, so if we go to the header.styles, let's remove the red background so we can see our icon. And now we have the YouTube text too. So this is looking good. But as you can see, the text is not exactly the same. It's bigger with a different font. So let's go ahead and fix that. So let's go back to the header.tsx. And in the text, we're going to pass a class name. And this is because in style components, you can style the component by a class name. So we're going to give this component a class name of logo. So we're going to go into the text.style.ts, and in here we're going to say ampersand.logo. This means every instance of text that has the class name logo, go ahead and apply the styles to it. So the style we want to apply is we want to give it a letter spacing of -1. This way they are a bit close together. We're going to give it a font size of 22 pixels. And we're going to give it a font family of Oswald, which we imported from the Google fonts earlier on. And then we're going to put a fallback font of sans serif. Let's go ahead and see. Nice. Okay, so this looks pretty good. If we changed it, if I go to the app.context and I change the theme to dark, we're going to see our text changes. Well, the color changes. So as you can see on the dark theme, we have the text white. And if we change it back from dark to light, we see it changes. So this looks really good. Okay, now let's work on the icon. So for the icon, it's going to be just a menu icon. So if we go here and put menu, it might take some, I'm doing SL. So this one, this is it. Okay, so to use it, we just copy the menu name. Let's go to the header.tsx. And just above the logo section, we're going to put the menu. So we have to import it. So I'm gonna import it, copy the import, paste it. And as usual, we're going to give it a size. In this case, we're going to give it a size of 17. Okay. Let's look at it. Nice. This looks good. Okay. But one thing we notice is the icons kind of have like a background around it. So in this one, we don't have a background, but when we hover over it, we do have a background. And then this icon has a background. And when we hover, it changes color. And this icon has no background, but when we click it, you kind of see that background. So they are all the same icons, but in some cases they have a background and in some cases they do not have a background. So this means we need a custom icon container. So let's go ahead and make that. So to make that, let's go to our utils and we're going to create a new file. It's going to be called icon.styles.ts. So as usual, we're going to say export const. We're going to say icon, and it's going to be equals to styled.div. We're going to have to import the styled from styled components.div. Okay. As usual, let's open the ampersand. Sorry, let's open the string literal. Okay, so in here, we're going to need to know if we want to show the background or not. So in styled components, we can take in props as usual, but in this case, since we're using TypeScript, we have to tell TypeScript the props we expect to take. So in this case, to pass in props, we're going to open this angle bracket, and in there, we're going to open the curve braces, the curve brackets. So the name of the prop is going to start with a $sign. This is because when we inspect the element, we don't want the prop name showing up in the element. So it's going to be called show background. It's going to be, we're going to add this question mark because it's optional. You can pass this or you can decide not to pass it. And the type of this is going to be a Boolean. Okay. So the background color is going to be, since we want to use the prop values, we're going to open it. So we're going to open curve braces. We're going to have the theme as usual, and we're also going to have this show background property, which will be $show background. Let's go ahead and put back the curve braces. Nice. So we're going to return, if we have that show background passed. Now this is just JavaScript. We're going to say theme.grade2. So use this background. Else, give the background, let the background be transparent. Good. Okay, so border radius is going to be 100 rem. We're just giving a big value so it's rounded. The color is going to be coming from the theme.text. So as usual, we open our braces, and in there we receive the theme, and then we return theme.text. Good. Again, if you're interested in learning about styled components, if this is a bit confusing, I have a really good styled components course on Udemy, so you can look into that. Okay, let's continue. So display is going to be flex. Justify content is going to be center. Align items is going to be center. And then padding is going to be 0.6 rem. And then the cursor is going to be a pointer. Let's go ahead and wrap this icon inside the icon container we just created. So let's import it. So it's just hit the tab key, import it, and we can move this by holding option and clicking up to move it inside. And then you can click Command S to format it. So we have the icon inside the icon container. Let's go ahead and see how this. As you can see, we don't have the background showing up. But when we hover, we can see that nothing happens. So we're going to have to add a class name here. And we're going to give it a class name of menu. This is because, again, with the class name, we can style the icon. So we're going to say ampersand, as we've seen before, and menu. Apply the style, and the style is going to be ampersand hover. So when we hover over it, we want the background to be background color, open the braces, then in here gonna take our theme, access our theme, and then we're going to return theme.grade2. Says there's a passing error. Let's see. Background color, open the braces. Okay. Okay, let's destructure and put grade 2 here. That way we can just say grade 2. Grade 2 will have to be wrapped in the braces. Okay, we have to get rid of one of those. Nice. Okay, so let's go back and see if we hover over this, we have kind of a square. It's showing, but it's square. Let's see our border radius is working. So do we have a border radius here? Oh, sorry, I said border. So this should be border radius. So if I hover it, nice, that's working. So this looks a lot like the original. Okay, so everything looks good. And in the next video, we're going to be working on the more section. Okay, so let's continue by working on the more section, which is going to be, go to the YouTube page, this one. So it has the Alt button, which is sign in, and it has this icon. And when we click on the icon, we get this drop down menu. But if you also notice, when I hover over the icon, we get this tooltip that says settings. Okay, let's continue. So in the more section, let's start by creating the Alt button. So let's do that by going into components, creating a new folder, and we're going to call it Alt button, small case, so it's camel case. Inside there, we're going to make a file called altbutton.tsx. It's also good practice to start your component name with a capital letter. Okay, so we're going to create this style file called altbutton.styles.ts. Now you might ask yourself, why do I put the .styles part? It makes it easier in the future. If I wanted to search for style sheets, I can hold Command P, and by typing in styles, I can see all the styles files available. So it just makes things a bit easier. Okay, let's go to our altbutton.tsx. Using the shorthand, let's create the component. So now we have the component. We can create the wrapper called styled alt button. So we can just copy the component name, paste it, and add styled to the front. This component doesn't exist yet, so let's go ahead and create it. So in our altbutton.styles.ts, let's say export const styled alt button, which is going to be equals to styled .div, and then we're going to open template strings. Good. Okay, so let's add a width, which is going to be max content. This is because whatever I'll put into it, we just want it to, the width to, well, the width to be the size of the contents of whatever we put inside. That was a bit harder to explain. Okay, display is going to be flex, and then let's add the color. The color is going to be, as usual, we're going to open the braces, open the curve braces, and inside there we're going to take our theme, and then we're going to destructure auth blue. So auth blue, good. Then we're going to return auth blue. Nice. If you remember, if we go to our theme.ts, we're going to see each theme has the auth blue. So let's see if we can, this one. So you see this is for the dark theme and this is for the light theme. In this case, they're the same, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's go back to the auth button, the styles. So we have our color, we have our display. Let's continue. So we want the justify content to be space between. We want the align items to be center. We want to add a gap of 0.5 rem. We want to add a border to it. So the border is going to be 2 pixels, solid, and we want to give it a color of gray too. So we can just copy it from here, and we can change the auth button to gray too. Nice. We're gonna go ahead and add some padding, and the padding will be 0.4 rem to the top and bottom and 0.7 rem to the sides. We're going to add a border radius of 10 rem. Okay, so let's go back to the auth button and let's import it. So now we have our styled auth button. Let's go ahead and see how it's looking. Of course, we can't see it because we have to bring it into the header component. So we can say auth button and import it. Nice. So this is our auth button. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, let's continue. To continue, let's go to the, so we'll go back to the auth button.tsx, and we have to add 2 things. The first thing we have to add is the user circle, so this icon. So if we go to our React icons, and let's say user circle, sorry, user dash circle, doesn't work. Let me see if I can remember. Okay, let's put it together, user circle, good. And the one I use come from FA. So let's look for it. Is it this one? No. Where's FA? Come on, find FA. Okay, this one. So we can copy this icon name, paste it here. We're going to give it a size of 22. Let's go ahead and import this icon. Nice. So we have our icon. Let's see how it's looking. Good. Let's go ahead and add the text. Remember, we already made a custom text component, so we're just going to bring that in. And in there, we're just going to add the text sign in. We're going to use a hard-coded text for now, but in the future, we're going to be adding internationalization to our application. And this is because we're going to be supporting French and English. But for now, this works. Okay, let's go ahead and see. This is looking good. Okay, so we want to style this auth text. So we can say, if we go to our text, our custom text component, so if we go to utils and we go to text.styles.ts, in there, just like with styled logo, we can style, so we'll do ampersand.auth, we can style the auth text by the class name auth. Okay, and all we want to style is the color. So we want to say the color is going to be, let's copy this and paste it. And the color is going to be the hot blue color. So we can say props.theme.hotblue. Good. Let's go ahead and see. This looks good. Nice. We can add a bit of font weight to it. So we can just say font weight, give it bold. Nice. Makes it look a lot better. Okay. So let's change the, if we go to the app.context.tsx, I'll just put this back to a dark theme. I kind of like working on the darker themes. Nice. So everything looks better, if I do say so myself. Okay, good. Now let's start working on the icon. So this should be a bit easier. If we go back to our header.tsx, right above the hot button component, so in the header.tsx, right above the header button component, we can add our icon, the more icon. But if you remember, we have the custom icon wrapper. So we can just bring that in. Have to find it. Let's see. So this one. Okay, so we do have it. So if I go to the header, icon. Okay, nice. So we have the icon wrapper, which we also used here. All we have to do now is wrap the icon. So let's find the icon. The icon is vertical alt. So this one. So let's copy the icon name, paste it, and let's copy the import and paste it. We're going to give the icon a size of 21. Good. Let's see what we have so far. Nice. But if we notice, our icon is clickable and our icon also has a tooltip. Okay, so we're going to be using a library called React Tooltip. Let's look through the library for a second. By clicking here, we can visit the home page. And this gives us an idea of how to use the library. So you see, whatever element we put it on, we have to add this data tooltip ID and the data tooltip content. We also have to add a tooltip that will have the ID. So let's put this to practice. So first things first, let's go to our terminal and paste our install command. Nice. So we've installed the React tooltip. And now let's use it. So to use this, we have to add the tooltips somewhere in our application. So what I'm going to do is, let's start by, going back to the page. We need this tooltip, okay? So we paste tooltip, and that tooltip is going to come from React tooltip. Here, let's use this demo ID, which is my tooltip for now. It also says the element we want the tooltip to show on should have these two attributes. So it should have the data tooltip ID. We can paste that and we can give it the same ID as my tooltip. And then it should also have this attribute data tooltip content, which is going to be our content, what we want to show up. In the future, this is going to be an internalization text, so to either be French or English. But for now, let's put it as English and just type in settings. Good. So let's go and see if it works. So we go to our application, let's hover over it, and we see our tooltip settings. But here's the drawdown to this. Every time we want to use a tooltip, we have to add this tooltip close by. So what if we make a component and it loops through all the tooltips we have in our application and it adds it to a part of our application? That way we don't have to add it everywhere. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. Okay, let's go ahead and make this, well, let's wrap up the tooltip. Okay, so we can create a component. Actually, it can be in the utils folder. Let's create a new file called tooltips.tsx. So unlike other files, this will actually be a Typescript JSX element. Okay, so what this file is going to do basically is going to return a bunch of tooltip components, and it's going to do that by, let's create first a variable called tooltips, and it's just going to be an array of strings, which will be our tooltip IDs. So I'm going to have one for settings. I believe the voice search has one and the search has one. Okay, so we're going to say settings. We're going to have another one for search, and we're going to have another one for voice search. Good. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to loop through tooltips using the map attribute. So we're going to say tooltips.map. And TypeScript is very smart to know that each element in the map is going to be a string. So we can just say, well, we're going to need two things, right? We're going to need ID, which will be the tooltip, and then the map attribute has an index. So TypeScript knows that this is going to be a string because it knows that this is an array of strings. So it's able to infer that, which is called type inference. So we're going to return tooltip, which comes from React Tooltip, and basically it's going to have the ID. Let's give it ID of ID, because when you use map you have to add IDs. It's going to have let's give it the ID will be ID, and let's give it a key. When we use map we have to have keys, right? So let's give it a key of index. Let's add this style because we need this tooltip to sit above whatever element is under it. So we don't want it to be hidden. So we're going to have to add a style. This is just going to be an inline style. So z-index is going to be, let's say 1000. Okay. And let us add no arrow because our tooltip have no arrows. So if we go here, we see it doesn't have arrows. Okay, let's see what we have. These still have arrows. Settings. Okay, so let's go to our header.tsx and let's remove this old tooltip. Before we remove it, let me just explain again. We have an array that hold IDs of tooltips, and then we're mapping through it. We can just remove this div and put a React fragment. So we're mapping through this array, and for each of them, we're returning a tooltip with each IDs. So we're going to have 3 tooltips with settings, search, and voice search. Okay, so let's go to our header.tsx and let's remove this tooltip here. Now to make it work, we have to import tooltips somewhere in our application. So let's put it in the app.tsx. We can put it right under global styles. Tooltips, import it. Good. Now this should work. So if I hover over this, I should see settings, but for some reason it's not showing. Let's refresh. It's not working. Let's just make sure. So we have settings. Let's make sure it's the same ID as this one. Okay, so it's not the same ID. So this is another thing. Whatever element we want it to show on, the data tooltip ID must be the same with the ID of the tooltip. So we have to replace this with data tooltip ID with settings. Good. Let's try again. So the reason it's not working is ID is not equals to string ID. Sorry. The ID is actually equals to ID. So this ID here. That's my bad. So when we hover over it, we see the settings now. Now let's make this clickable. And when we click it, we want to show the menu. So when we click it, we want to show the menu. Okay, so let's go back to the header.tsx. And this icon right here, we're going to add onClick. And the onClick is going to be equals to, first let's create a state that is going to say if the settings is showing or not. So it's going to be const. Let's call it show settings. Show settings. And then the function will be called set show settings. Good. It's going to be equals to use state. And we're going to give, since we're going to initialize it, we don't need to, so we'll just say false for now. Since we're initializing it to false, we don't have to annotate this like so by saying boolean. We can still do it, but it's unnecessary in this case. Good. Okay, so in here, in the onClick, we're going to say whenever we click it, set show settings to whatever settings was. So we wanted to set show settings to the opposite of settings, or the opposite of the current settings. So we can say current state, which will give us what the current value is, should be equals to bang current state. So this is going to inverse it. So if it was true, it's going to inverse it to false. If it was false, it's inverse it to true. So this is like toggling. Okay, so now we have that done. We have to create the settings component. But for now, we can just create a, let's just put something that says settings. So we can make it like a p tag. For now, it's going to be settings. And if it's showing, it's going to show if this is true. So we can say show settings, $, settings. So let's try that and see if it works. Let's refresh. I think it's showing up somewhere, but let's see. Let's set this to true and see. Okay, so it's showing up. So if I click this, it goes away. If I put this back, it goes. Okay, so that's good. Let me do that again. Nice. Okay, so it's showing up, but we don't want it over here, right? We want it down here. So let's go ahead and create our settings component. So in the components folder, let's create a new folder called settings. And in there, we're going to create a new file called settings.tsx. We're also going to create a new file called settings.styles.ts. So in the settings.tsx, as usual, we're going to create our component. And then we're going to create a wrapper called styled settings. So let's create the styled component. So as usual, we're going to say export const styled settings equals to styled.div and open the template literal. So in here, we're going to say display flex, because if you notice, it's vertically aligned. Okay, so we're going to say display flex. We're going to give it a flex direction of column, which will make them vertically aligned. We're going to say the background column is going to be, we're going to open our braces. We're going to access our theme, and in the theme we have settings. So settings BG. So again, if I come to my theme file, theme.txt, we see we have the settings BG color here. Okay, let's go back to the file name, settings.styles. Good. Now we're going to return settings BG. I have to do that in here, settings BG, and we can wrap this in curve braces. Good. So we have the background color. Let's put the position. It's going to have a position of absolute. We're going to give positioning to the right 85%. We're going to position it to the top 100%. Let's give it the width of let's say 17.3 view width, which is what I used before. Okay, we're going to give it a padding of 0.5 rem. Nice. Let's add a border radius of 0.5 rem, and let's give it a box shadow of 0 pixels, 10 pixels, 43 pixels, minus 3 pixels. And then for the color, we're going to copy this, and rather than settings BG, we're going to use settings shadow. Nice. Okay, so last thing is we want to add a Z index. That's because we want it to sit on top whatever might be under it. So let's give it a really high Z index. Now let's go back to settings.tsx and let us import our settings styled component. Okay, so now we have our settings component. We can replace this text with settings. Let's see if it worked. So we click on this, nice. Click on that, click on this, click on that. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to start adding the different menus we're going to have, which is just going to be the French and theme. And we're also going to try to make them work. Okay, so let us work on the settings container. As you can see, we're going to only do the appearance and the language. For the appearance, we see we have an icon, we have a label, which is appearance, and then we have a value. In this case, this is going to be dark theme. The same for the language. We have an icon, we have the label, language, and then we have a value, English. So we're going to simplify ours. It's not going to be complicated like this. We're not going to have this part, but it's still going to follow the same functionality. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So if we go to the settings.tsx file, remove the text, and inside the container, let's start by creating, just above the return, let's start by creating a variable called settings. And basically, settings is going to be an array of the different settings. So it's going to be an array of objects. So the object is going to have attributes like label, which is in this case is going to be language. Again, we're going to have to internationalize this text, but for now, we're just going to hard code language. So icon is going to be, let's go to our icon library. Sorry, React icons. Okay, and the icon is going to be HI language. So we can copy the icon. Let's give it a size of 23. Let's go ahead and copy the import, and let's paste it here. Nice. Okay, so we have the icon. Next we want the value. In this case, the value would be, let's hard code English for now. And lastly, we need the ability to click. So for now, let's just say onClick is going to be equals to, sorry, onClick is going to be just a function that returns no. So pretty much it does nothing for now. Okay, let's go ahead and duplicate this. So right under here, we're going to have appearance. The icon is going to be GoMon. Let's say Moon. Moon. Okay, good. GoMon. Nice. Okay. So let's copy this icon name. We can replace, let's just copy the name, replace it here, and let's copy the import, put it right under here. Nice. Okay, so now we have this array of objects of different I'll say different settings. Let's go ahead and use the map attribute to loop through them. So in here, we're going to open the curly braces, and we're going to say settings.map. And inside here, let us go ahead and destructure. So we want to take out the label, we want to get the icon, we want to get the value, and we want to get the onClick attributes. Then we're going to return a styled component settings. Well, setting, because this is as settings, and each individual one is we'll just call it a setting. So in there, we're gonna have the icon, and right below we're gonna have the text. So this will be our custom text component, and inside there we're gonna say, let us interpolate. So again, this is just JavaScript. We're gonna say label, put semicolon, and then we're gonna add the value. Good. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our setting styled component. So inside this setting.style.csx, let's say export const, paste it. It's going to be equals to styled.div. Nice. So let's say we have a display of flex. We have the align items of center. We have a gap of 1 rem. We have the width of 100%. We have a height of 3 rem. We have a pattern left of 1 rem. And for the color, let's go ahead and, well, we can just copy from here since we already have a way to access colors. And rather than settings BG, let's replace that with text, because each color have the text. So for the dark theme to be a lighter text. Okay, let's start the hover property. So anytime we hover over this, the background color is going to change to grade 2. Nice. And then we're just going to give it a cursor pointer. Good. So let's go back to our settings.tsx file and let us import setting. Now we have it. Let's see how it looks. Nice. Just refresh this. Looks like the gray is not really showing up well. Let's see if we can use another color. So for the grade 2, let's update in the theme.ts file, let's update the grade 2 to use 373739. That way we get a bit lighter background color when we hover. Okay, so now let's fix this. Whenever we click on this, we want to change English to French, and then we also want to change the appearance from dark to light. In this case, we had coded English. Let's start from the appearance. So if we go to the app.context.csx, you're going to notice we already have the theme. So we know what the theme is. So in that case, we can just go ahead and use it. I think we already use it in the app.tsx file. So we can just copy, and let's go back to these settings and let's paste it. Of course, we have to import the use app context. Good. So now we have what the theme is. So in here, the value can be theme, right? So if we click this, you're going to see the theme is dark. And if we go to the app.context and we change this dark to light, you're going to see it's going to update here to light. But we want this to come from our language file. So let's go ahead and change that. So if we go to the settings.tsx, first of all, let's change this back to dark. I really do not like light themes. So if we go back to the settings.tsx, we have to create a text dictionary. And I'm going to show you what that means. So if we go back to the app.context.tsx, we need to know what language we're using. So to do that, let us create a new variable to store the language. So we're going to call it const language and then set language. And it's going to be pretty much like this. So we can copy from this theme, and they're going to be two languages. It's either English or it's French. We can start off with English as the default. Good. So let's go ahead and pass the language. Good. We need to add the language here to the context value. And the language would just be, just like above, is going to be either English or French. So we can just copy it from here and paste it. Nice. Okay. So what we need now is something that toggles the language. So we're going to write a function called const toggle language. And what this function is going to do is it's going to switch the language. If it's English, it's going to switch it to French. And if it's French, it's going to switch it to English. So basically just vice versa. So we're going to say set language is going to take language and it's going to return if language is equals to English. I want you to, so if it's equals to English, I want you to return French. Else, I want you to return English. Good. So now we have this toggle language, which we're going to pass into the value. And then we can just hover over toggle language and we can copy this. So that's the annotation for toggle language. So again, you can just hover over the function and copy the annotation that Typescript has given us. So now we have a way to toggle the language. But when we know if the language is English or French, we need a way to get it in uppercase. For example, French is French in English, but in French it's français. For example, so if you see, our English here is in small letter, but right here it's in capital letter. So we need a text file. So we're going to go to our utils folder, and in there we're going to create a new file. Let's call that file translations.ts. Utils, new file, translations.cs. Now, this is a file I'm going to provide you with. Depending on where you're watching this, maybe check the comment section or a place where a file is meant to be attached. But I'm basically going to copy the file I have and just paste it for now. So let me explain. So just like the theme, this is the interface for the file. This is every property, every text property, and their type. Obviously, they're all strings, right? Now for English, sign in is going to be sign in, settings is going to be settings, appearance is going to be appearance, etc. And then if we go down, French, this is sign in French, this is settings in French, etc. As you can see, we've annotated them with the proper annotations, translation, and then we've exported icons that have the language. So the reason we did it like this is if we have this language and we know if we're currently using English or French, which we currently have here, English or French, we can import this language, pass what we currently have, which is English or French, depending, and then it's going to give us this. So if it's French, it's going to give us this object, and from this object we can access the different properties. So let's go ahead and use this. So if we go back to the app.context.csx, we can pass text, and we're going to say text is going to be equals to language, which we're going to get from translation, and it's going to be this language. So again, language is an object with English or French. So this is a shorthand property. This also reads like this, right? Okay, this is just JavaScript. So if we pass French, we're going to get this object, and if we pass English, we're going to get this object, and then we can access different properties from the English or French. So let's go back to our app context, and we're going to say text is going to be, since it's going to be either this or this, is going to be of this interface. This is the type. So we can go here and say text will have this type of translations. Again, you can export an interface to be used in different files. Okay, so we have our text and we have our theme. Let's create a way to toggle the theme while we're here. It's going to be similar to the toggle language, so we can just copy that, paste it, and let's say toggle theme. Now if the theme is currently light, so this is going to be theme, this will be theme, and if the theme is light, I want it to switch to dark, and if it's already dark, I want it to go to light. Let me see what the issue is. It says English or French, light to dark is not assignable, toggle theme. Okay, so this is going to be theme, and basically we're going to say if theme is equals to light, I want it to go to dark, else I want it to go to light, and this is going to be set theme, not set language. Okay, so let's go ahead and pass the toggle theme, and then up here toggle theme is gonna, we can just copy the annotation TypeScript has given us, so which is of type void, and the reason it's void is because this doesn't return anything. So a function that doesn't return anything, it returns void. Okay, so now we have a way to toggle the theme and toggle the language, and we also have a way of knowing the theme and knowing the language. That's very good. And we also have our dictionary of text. Okay, so let's go back to the settings.csx and use all these things. So in here we can take the text out, and we can say, since we know what the language is, let's also access the language, and we get that nice autocomplete since TypeScript knows what this returns. So in here we can then say text.language. So if you see, TypeScript is going to give us autocomplete of all the text we have, and we can just put in language. So that's good. And now for the value, we're going to say text. We can then say language. If language is equals to English, then we're going to say access the French property, else we want to access the English property. So we can just copy this, paste. Nice. Okay, and the onClick is basically just going to be toggle language. So let me get that first, toggle language, and let's also just get toggle theme since we're going to use it next. So toggle language, just paste it here, call the function, good. So we're going to do the same thing. So toggle theme is going to replace this, and then here is going to be text dot appearance. Nice. And then the value would be the same thing. So if we can just copy this, it's going to be text, let's say theme, which is from here. If the theme is dark, let's switch to light text, and vice versa. Okay, let's go ahead and see if it works. Okay, so appearance, if I click on it, so it says if I click on it, it's going to go to a light theme, and if I click on it, it's going to go to a dark theme. Okay, so that works. And the language, it says if I click on it, it's going to go to French. Nice. If I click on it, it goes to English. Good. So everything works. So we can now go back to our signing button and make this a text, make the text come from our translation file. So let's go back to the auth button. So the auth button.csx, we can go to settings and copy our use app context. All we need from here is the text. So we can get rid of all this, get rid of this, and we're going to import the use app context. Good. Okay. So here we're going to say text dot sign in. Nice. So if I go here and change the language, we see changes to French, changes back to English. So this is working. This looks very, very good. In the next section, we're going to start working on the search functionality.